Here at Harvey's, we're incredibly lucky because we deal in the great period of English craftsmanship, English antique furniture made between about 1660 and the end of the 19th century. It was a period of great change, and I wanted to just take a few minutes to discuss some of the changes that took place in styles and tastes during the period that we're talking about. If we go back to the middle of the 17th century, that was the period of the Commonwealth, Cromwell, and austerity. Furniture design was quite austere, very little in the way of decoration, and it wasn't until the restoration of the monarchy in about 1660, when Charles II came and took the throne of Britain, that we see the first real inclination towards English cabinet making and English furniture. And in fact, it's in this book by Adam Bowitt, English Furniture from Charles II to Queen Anne. He says the year 1660 has long been regarded as marking the beginning of modern English furniture making. How right he was. And in fact, the first chapter is called The Restoration, and it's all about the restoration of the monarchy and the different styles that came in with Charles II, because of course he had lived most of his life until then on the continent, and when he came over he brought with him a lot of foreign ideas, cabinet makers and designers. And so we go through the late 17th century, and there are any number of different styles that come to the forefront, including one which was, I suppose we'd call it the Chinese taste, but in fact it was more Japanned than Chinese. And this treatise of varnishing and Japanning by Stalker and Parker was published in 1688, and it has lots of illustrations of what I suppose people here in Britain had brought back from the continent, thinking that these were typical of the designs for Japanning furniture, of how the people lived, of the animals there and so on. So that was an important influence, and the style of Oriental decorated furniture, japanned or varnished or lacquered, was very much in the forefront towards the end of the 17th century and the early 18th century. And then as we move through the reign of Queen Anne into the reign of George I, we see the change coming about towards the Palladian style. The Palladian architecture and the Palladian style was very much put forward by Lord Burlington. Lord Burlington worked with both William Kent and Colin Campbell and produced the most wonderful designs in the Palladian manner. And we've got a book of designs here, designs of Mr. Inigo Jones and Mr. William Kent. And wherever you look in this book, you can see the Palladian feel. It's got something, it's very strongly architectural, but it's got something of the Italian feel to it, of the continental feel. You can see this going through and pervading through most of this period. So as we go through from the Palladian, we move into the middle years of the 18th century, which was an interesting period because you have again different styles. Whereas with all of these, we see the same themes occurring time and again. By the time we get to the middle of the 18th century, Thomas Chippendale, who was of course associated with that period, was working very much in the Chinese style, as he called it, which of course is merely a reflection of the earlier Japanning that we were talking about at the end of the 17th century. So once we get to Chippendale, we have his definitive style. He was certainly working in the Rococo, which was an adaptation of the French rocaille, and he was working as well in other modes, such as the Gothic, which again is a direct derivative of the 16th and 17th century Gothic styles. But then he progressed, along with others, such as Ince and Mayhew, who produced their universal system of household furniture. But again, in Chippendale's Gentleman and Cabinet Makers Director, we see standard pieces, but we also see the decoration, which is very much Rococo, influenced by the French designs, and Gothic. You know, there's a writing table here with a lot of Gothic tracery in it. But we also know that Chippendale himself was influenced later very much by the work of Robert Adam. Robert Adam and his brother James were the foremost neoclassical architects and designers of the late 18th century. And they influenced Chippendale, who produced some of the most wonderful work in the neoclassical style. And we've only got to look at these wonderful commodes, the commodes that he produced, one of which was probably for Melbourne House in London, with a quite astonishing array of neoclassical iconography. Robert Adam had studied over in Italy, and he was influenced by all the architecture that was there, along with things like the Raphael loggia within the Vatican, where of course you have this wonderful, wonderful view of all these columns and overdoors, all in the neoclassical style, painted by Raphael. And we're very lucky that we have a set of engravings that portray exactly that. Robert Adam, and this book is called The Genius of Robert Adam and His Interiors. He was a genius. He was probably the first architect to design carpets and ceilings to reflect the same patterns. His iconography was extensive, using all the different icons that he'd seen in the neoclassical works that he'd seen out in Italy, and using pastel colours, inlays, marquetry, parquetry, you name it. He produced very much his own style, which became extremely popular, and as I've said, was worked on by Thomas Chippendale, who produced some pieces for his clients, but also by another very interesting company, Ince and Mayhew. Ince and Mayhew were very, very high-grade cabinet makers working in London during the last quarter of the 18th century. They produced any number of fabulous pieces in the neoclassical style. They produced a commode for the Countess of Derby. They produced all sorts of beautiful pieces with neoclassical inlay and marquetry. From the 18th century, we move into the Regency period with its flamboyance, and again, the Chinese taste that came back once more. And again in the Regency period, and moving into the Victorian period, we have the Gothic. And then we move into the second half of the 19th century, when something quite amazing happened. There was a company in London called Wright and Mansfield, and Wright and Mansfield bought a number of pieces that were made 100 years earlier by Ince and Mayhew for their own use and collection. They then used them as models for furniture that they produced, and Wright and Mansfield were probably the leading creators of the 19th century neoclassical furniture that is so sought after today. They worked and produced pieces that were almost better than the originals by Ince and Mayhew, who they actually admired greatly. And when we talk of Wright and Mansfield, that's the reason why we're here today, to look at a wonderful pair of console tables that were made by Wright and Mansfield in the last quarter of the 19th century.